Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Martinez scores 21 to help number 22 Utah State top Air Force 72-60. Sunak struggles to halt UK Tories drifting toward rival Badenoch. They used to swim and play on the beach in northern Gaza. Now these children are wondering if they'll ever return home. Trauma, debt haunts the Nepalis paid to fight for Russia in Ukraine. Novel highlights enormous risks family took to survive Russian civil war. Martinez scores 21 to help number 22 Utah State top Air Force 72-60. Associated Press. Number 22 Utah State defeated Air Force 72-60 in a college basketball game on Friday night. Ian Martinez led the Aggies with 21 points, while Mason Falslev contributed 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. Ethan Taylor led Air Force with 15 points. Utah State led throughout the game and secured their third consecutive win. They are now one step closer to clinching a share of the Mountain West Conference regular season title. Air Force has never won a road game against a ranked opponent and now holds a record of 4-91 against ranked teams. Sunak struggles to halt UK Tories drifting toward rival Badenoch. Bloomberg. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch is emerging as a potential challenger to UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party, according to sources. Badenoch has made a series of interventions on high-profile issues and is the bookmakers' favorite to succeed Sunak. Some of her recent actions, such as criticizing Sunak's migration policy and wading into a row over transgender rights, have played well with grassroots Conservative Party members who will have a say in choosing the next leader. However, they have caused concern within Sunak's team, who worry that Badenoch's actions are undermining his chances of winning the next general election. Badenoch has a reputation for being abrasive and has been accused of being motivated by her own leadership ambitions. While Sunak has no leverage over Badenoch, he cannot afford to lose her from his cabinet without facing a leadership challenge. They used to swim and play on the beach in northern Gaza. Now these children are wondering if they'll ever return home. CNN. Children in Gaza are living in an extremely dangerous and fragile environment due to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The lives of these children are disrupted and in danger as they face homelessness, starvation, and violence. Many have been orphaned or have lost loved ones. The Israeli military offensive has destroyed homes, neighborhoods, and many areas of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli attacks have killed over 30,000 Palestinians, including 12,550 children. Many children have had their lives dramatically altered due to injuries sustained from Israeli strikes. The war has also led to forced displacement for many children, making them even more vulnerable to malnutrition and disease. Children in Gaza are living in cramped conditions with little privacy and many are separated from their parents. They are unable to go to school and are being deprived of a proper education. The war has also had a severe psychological impact on children, with many displaying symptoms such as bedwetting, nightmares, and fear of leaving the house. Trauma, debt haunts the Nepalis paid to fight for Russia in Ukraine. South China Morning Post. Thousands of Nepali men have been recruited to fight in the Russian army in Ukraine, lured by promises of high salaries and a chance for a better life. Many of these men were deceived by unscrupulous agents who tricked them into going to the war zone. Some were even forced to take out loans or use their life savings to fund the journey. These men are now returning home disillusioned, with war wounds, trauma, and additional debt. The exact number of Nepali mercenaries in Ukraine remains uncertain, but estimates range from 8,000 to 14,700, with hundreds more injured or killed. The Nepali government has asked Russia to stop recruiting its citizens and is working to bring back those who are still serving in the Russian army. However, little progress has been made in repatriating the soldiers or providing compensation to the families of those who have been killed or injured. The families of the soldiers are left in grief and fear, desperately seeking answers and closure. The recruitment of Nepali men as mercenaries in Ukraine highlights the desperate economic situation in Nepal, where many people are forced to seek work abroad due to unemployment, low wages, and a lack of opportunities. Remittances from overseas workers contribute greatly to Nepal's foreign currency reserves. However, the recruitment of Nepali men as mercenaries in illegal and dangerous conflicts is a new and troubling development. The lure of higher salaries and the glamorization of military life on social media platforms like TikTok have led many young men to make risky and ill-informed decisions. The Nepali government and international community must work together to address this issue, protect the rights and safety of Nepali citizens, and provide support and assistance to those who are returning from the conflict. Novel highlights enormous risks family took to survive Russian civil war. ABC. Simon J. Carey, a writer from Yanaki, Australia, has released his debut novel Siberians, Fire on the Ice, which tells the story of the Russian Civil War through the experiences of the Sunak family. The novel explores the family's decision to stay and fight against the Bolsheviks, their subsequent flight to China and later to Thailand, and their struggles to rebuild their lives amid the threats of communism. Carey was inspired to write the novel after meeting Arlette Sickman, the sole surviving member of the Sunak family, and being given access to their diaries, photos, and documents. 2 Republicans competing in NC01 race. Yahoo! 2 Republicans are vying to unseat incumbent Democratic Representative Don Davis in Tuesday's primary, Sandy Smith and Lori Buckhout. Buckhout, a former Army colonel and combat commander from Edenton, is making her first foray into politics. After retiring in 2010, she founded Corvus Consulting, a defense firm whose primary goal was to reduce deaths and injuries from improvised explosive devices. Her family has a military history stretching back to the French and Indian War, she said. Service runs in the family. What comes after the post-war world? The Globe and Mail. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has revealed that much of the world will not align with the West against Russia, even when Russia is waging war against Ukraine. Many countries are happy to maintain close relations with Russia and blame the West or Ukraine itself for the conflict. This has led to the possibility of a post-Western world, where great and middle powers pursue their national interests in shifting alliances. In addition, there is a growing concern among European ministers that Russia may attack NATO territory in the next 3 to 5 years, leading to a pre-war era reminiscent of the 1930s. The decisions made in the coming years will shape the world for decades to come. U.S. military says conducted strike against Houthi missile from Yemen. The Globe and Mail. The U.S. military conducted a strike against an Iranian-backed Houthi surface-to-air missile in Yemen. The Houthi rebels had previously launched an anti-ship ballistic missile into the Red Sea. Biden treads carefully through Middle East minefield. BBC. U.S. President Joe Biden is facing political pressure from pro-Palestinian groups in the wake of the conflict in Gaza. Biden has been forced to navigate the complexities of Middle East policy and make decisions that have angered parts of his coalition. While most opinion polls suggest that the American public supports Israel in the conflict, younger voters and people of color, key components of Biden's Democratic coalition, do not. These groups are calling for a permanent ceasefire and support for diplomatic efforts in the UN. They are also threatening to end American military aid to Israel if it does not change course. However, pro-Palestinian groups remain a vocal minority, and the American public is more concerned about the economy, immigration, and abortion rights. Additionally, there are as many Jewish voters in Michigan who are passionate about supporting Israel as there are pro-Palestinian voters. Biden's campaign officials hope that the prospect of a binary choice between Biden and former President Donald Trump will encourage dissenting voices in the Democratic political coalition to ultimately fall into line. News leaders around the world pledge support for journalists in Gaza. New York Times. A letter has been signed by nearly 60 leaders from international and regional news outlets, calling for the protection and freedom of journalists covering the war in Gaza. The letter states that journalists in Gaza are facing intense personal risk, but continue to report despite this. It also calls on Israeli authorities to protect journalists as non-combatants, as required by international law, and that those responsible for violations of this protection should be held accountable. The letter has prompted backlash from some journalists who said they or their colleagues were punished by their news organizations for affirming their support for Palestinian journalists and civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your favorite observer from the 6 dimensions, Dr. Six. Today, we've got a mix of news stories ranging from sports to politics, war, literature, and international solidarity. Let's dive in. In the sports world, number 22 Utah State secured their 3rd consecutive win in college basketball, defeating Air Force 72-60. Ian Martinez led the Aggies with 21 points, bringing them one step closer to clinching a share of the Mountain West Conference regular season title. Meanwhile, in the UK, Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch is emerging as a potential challenger to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party. Badenoch's recent interventions on high-profile issues have played well with grassroots party members, but have caused concern within Sunak's team. Will Badenoch's actions undermine Sunak's chances of winning the next general election? Only time will tell. Moving on to a more serious note, the conflict between Israel and Hamas has taken a devastating toll on the lives of children in Gaza. They face homelessness, starvation, violence, and the loss of loved ones. The war has left many children orphaned, injured, and displaced, with little access to education or a proper upbringing. The psychological impact on these children is severe, and their suffering is heart-wrenching. It's a reminder of the urgent need for peace and stability in the region. From one war to another, we turn to the story of Nepali men recruited as mercenaries to fight in the Russian army in Ukraine. Many of these men were deceived by unscrupulous agents and are now returning home disillusioned, traumatized, and burdened with debt. The Nepali government is working to bring them back and provide support, but progress has been slow. This highlights the desperate economic situation in Nepal, where many people are forced to seek work abroad. The government and international community must address this issue and protect the rights and safety of Nepali citizens. On a lighter note, let's talk literature. Simon J. Carey, a writer from Australia, has released his debut novel Siberians, Fire on the Ice. The novel tells the story of the Sukhov family during the Russian Civil War, their flight to China and Thailand, and their struggles against communism. Carey was inspired by meeting Arlet Sikman, the sole surviving member of the Sukhov family, and gaining access to their personal diaries and documents. It's incredible how history can inspire such powerful storytelling. In the world of politics, we have the North Carolina primary race between Republican Sandy Smith and Lori Buckhout, who are vying to unseat Democratic Representative Dawn Davis. Buckhout, a former Army colonel, is making her first foray into politics, bringing her military experience and a commitment to reducing deaths and injuries from improvised explosive devices. It's always interesting to see new faces enter the political arena. Now, let's tackle some global issues. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has revealed a lack of alignment with the West against Russia, potentially leading to a post-Western world where countries pursue their national interests in shifting alliances. European ministers are even concerned about a possible attack on NATO territory in the coming years, reminiscent of the pre-war era of the 1930s. The decisions made now will shape the world for decades to come. Meanwhile, the U.S. military conducted a strike against a Houthi missile in Yemen, adding another layer of complexity to the Middle East minefield that President Joe Biden must navigate. He's facing pressure from pro-Palestinian groups in the wake of the Gaza conflict, but also needs to consider the broader American public's concerns. It's a delicate balancing act for Biden. Lastly, nearly 60 leaders from international and regional news outlets have signed a letter pledging support for journalists covering the war in Gaza. These brave journalists face personal risk but continue to report on the ground. The letter calls on Israeli authorities to protect journalists as non-combatants, as required by international law. It's a powerful display of solidarity, though it has also sparked backlash from some journalists who faced consequences for supporting Palestinian journalists and civilians. Let's hope for a world where journalists can report freely and safely. That's all for today, folks. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions or opinions? I'm here to chat, so let's get the discussion going. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.